Jan Keck, my man, welcome to the Human to Human podcast. So grateful we could have you here today.
Yes, I'm human, you're human. This makes sense.
Dude, I'm so glad we're doing this. And I'm also
hmm
glad that we kind of waited a little while before we got you on, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's been fascinating to watch your journey and like all the other people that you've interviewed on your podcast and how we both have grown from the moment that we met in person,
Mm-hmm.
having a dinner, surprise, surprise, having deep conversations. Yeah, it's been a crazy, crazy journey.
Dude, it's so cool because when I moved here in Toronto, I guess 3 years ago now, like you were one of the first people I met. And as soon as I heard about you, as soon as I saw the Ask Deep questions that we'll get into, as soon as I just got a glimpse of your vibe, I was like, whoa, another guy who cares about community. How cool is that?
Yeah, exactly. I felt the same way. I don't even remember exactly, like I had no idea who you are, but all I saw was a post online. Hey, I'm bringing together some entrepreneurs for a dinner who would like to join. And I think you got a lot of requests.
And you know
Um,
what? Sometimes it's as simple as that. You put yourself out
yeah,
there, say, "Hey, I want to do this thing," and see who puts their hands up. So, man, I'm stoked to have you here today. I want to talk about Ask Deep questions. I want to talk about bringing people together, creating psychological safety, which is, I know, really important to you. How to be present when connecting on Zoom. I think that's something that a lot of people are gonna really appreciate and resonate with, and how to create magical moments at virtual events because you're, top of the game when it comes to that. So, before we dive into that, tell me and tell the listeners a little bit more about your journey and what's brought you to where you are today.
yeah. So when people usually ask me these days, what do you do? I have now a short answer, but I struggled for the longest time finding an answer that really resonated with me. And now I just say I help people feel less alone and leave it at that until the follow-up question comes. Because to me, that was the thing that I experienced moving from Germany, which is where I'm originally from, to Canada. And the alone or loneliness that I experience is different than what most people think of. Most of the time when you think about somebody having this feeling of loneliness, you're imagining them completely by themselves in like this deserted space or alone sitting in their room. But I actually felt this feeling while being surrounded by lots of people. When I first moved here, I really wanted, like, I didn't know a single person. Actually, that's not true. I knew one person that was like an acquaintance, exchange student that I crashed on her couch for the first few days, but that was it. But I had to rebuild my whole network, and I wasn't even sure if I was going to stay in Canada at that time. So I didn't really put in as much effort as I would have if I knew, okay, I'm moving and I'm staying. And I just made all these mostly superficial connections. I was really proud to get to like 500 LinkedIn connections at one day. And I still felt pretty disconnected from everyone. I would not say that those 500 LinkedIn connections were any meaningful relationships that I had built. So kind of fast forward 6 years later, I attend this weekend retreat that really changed, I'd say, my whole life. Because in this one weekend, I made over 30 new friends. And on the last day, when everybody was saying goodbye to each other, I look across the room and I see people like hugging and exchanging contact information. And now I describe it as almost like a spiritual experience where I could see the energy vibrating out of people's bodies because they were also supercharged with these feelings of community and belonging and these new friendships that I sometimes say, like if you ever watch the Care Bears, you know how they shoot these rainbows out of their bellies? That's kind of what I was visualizing happening in the room, and just this kind of energy that really lit me up. Like I was in a way floating. I was not walking. When I left, I was floating for like the next few days anywhere that I went, and people that I had conversations with, like they felt that there was something different about me. And re-engineering what actually happened on that weekend was I connected with people that share the same values, that are going to the same destination, like we're headed towards similar goals, and we were pretty vulnerable with each other, not only in the conversations we were having, but also physically uncomfortable. Like we had to climb this high rope structure, and this was in January in Canadian winter, where it was like freezing and everything was icy, and like we had to literally support each other by holding the rope for our teammates. So just the whole experience, I'm like, all the right components came together where I felt, okay, this is what I'm missing in my life. It's not that I'm missing people, it's missing the right kind of people and the right kinds of connection.
Man, as soon as you said the Care Bears thing, I used to love that show. And yeah, everyone wanted that superpower, right? I wish you could just open up your chest like Superman or Superwoman and just have this beam of positivity and love and magic come out of you. What was it about seeing the people like hugging and having that experience? Like what shifted in your belief system, or what shifted in just in your personal being when you witnessed that for the first time versus what you were doing on LinkedIn? Because on LinkedIn, that 500 connection mark is this elusive number that everyone wants 500 plus, because that's kind of where they cap it.
Exactly. That's why I was like, yes, I made it to 500. Now I'm legit. But yeah, it actually was not in that moment that I had the big epiphany. It's only looking back that this was the moment. It took me actually until the year after, going back to the same retreat. I think it was the year after, maybe even 2 years after, where I had another really impactful experience, where I broke down in tears when somebody else was sharing the story of how they felt supported by their friends and community through having a really bad health challenge. And I was not sad, but like tears were kind of flowing down my face in that moment, and I could not control it. Just kind of floodgates opened and came out of me. And the reason why I was not sad nor happy was like this in-between feeling that I can't really name, was because I felt so happy for that person to have had that support, but at the same time I realized I don't have that in my life. So there was like this happiness and sadness that happened in that moment, and that's where I realized, oh wow, this is something I need to be working on. This is not something that happens by accident, and I already had the right ingredients. I just didn't, I guess, put together the whole cake. We're staying with like the cooking recipe metaphor.
And there's something powerful when that happens, right? There's the emotion, the love, the vulnerability, the transparency, just the feeling of like someone's actually got my back. And I think that's what I was also missing a large part of my life was you had all these friends on Facebook and LinkedIn connections, but like it never went anywhere past that. And I do this thing every single day. You might be aware of this, that I do this, but I tell everyone, and I'm not ashamed of it, but every day on Facebook when it says it's someone's birthday, I have my own litmus test of, is this a person who's in my life? Is this a person who's serving me, and vice versa? Is there anything here? And if I don't get that positive feeling inside of me, I actually just unfriend people every single day on their birthday. And it's out of no negative space. It's actually with like the utmost love. It's like if Jan and Karan don't speak for 10 years and we went to high school together, so like we're friends on Facebook, in my opinion, like that relationship was once formed 10 years ago that is no longer doing anything for either of us. So I use that as a daily reminder. Whenever I go on Facebook and I see whose birthday it is, I'll just go unfriend people who are no longer in my life.
Yeah, I love that. I love that activity. I actually have something that I do once a year, which is like a relationship evaluation activity. And I see it as there's 3 different types of people in your life. There's the ones that lift you up. Actually, now I need to make sure that I remember them right. There's the ones that lift you up. There's the ones that are the energy vampires that like completely drain you, and kind of the people who are in between, who could go either way. And energy vampires that really drain you, like those are the people I would unfollow or unfriend on social media, that I would not keep reaching out to. And the interesting thing is, oftentimes just the fact of not putting energy in that relationship makes them fade away. Happened to me many times with people where like I really want there to be a friendship, but it's always me who has to work so hard. Like, hey, let's get together. Yeah, let's get together. And then they like flake out last minute.
Right.
Same story every time. At one point, I just said, you know what? This energy is really draining me. Let's stop reaching out. And that person I actually have not seen or spoken to unless we cross each other on the street by accident. Mm-hmm. And my life is better for it, because now I can focus on the few people that are the ones that lift me up, the ones that when I see their name come up on my phone, that's kind of also one of my litmus tests. Do I get excited and I'm like going to pick up, or am I going to let it go to voicemail? Because I'm usually not a person that picks up their phone very often anymore these days.
Right.
So if you call me and I pick up, then you're a pretty special person.
Dude, I feel like we've got a lot of similarities in how we operate. Same thing. I call them battery drainers, battery energizers, and battery neutralizers. Your version of the Facebook phone call is my version of Facebook unfriending. It's so similar. So man, let's talk about something that's really exciting for me that has something to do with you. So on my second date with Brandy, we were over at my place. We were just chilling out. We were hanging out. We had just left a Cirque du Soleil show, opened up some wine. I was like, hey, let's do this thing called Ask Deep Questions. And she's like, what are you talking about? I was like, well, I've got this deck that my friend created. It's called Ask Deep Questions. And there's 3 categories of questions that will take you from, essentially a stranger to more and more vulnerable to brave and curious. And we played your, I don't know if you'd call it a game, or we used your product, Ask Deep Questions, and within a 2-hour window, like got into the most emotional, real, raw, vulnerable conversations that deepened our relationship like nothing before. And being somebody who loves genuine questions and love going deep with people, your deck just made us like fall in love quicker. It was so cool. So tell me a little bit about like how this product came to be. What was the inspiration behind it? And I know you've had it for a while, so tell me like how it's evolved in the last number of years.
Yeah, so I think it evolved the most in the first year. And with many great ideas, they usually start because you have like a problem yourself that you want to solve. So this was maybe like a year or 2 after I had that experience at that weekend retreat, that I knew, okay, what I want is more meaningful conversations that both of us, or the group, everybody is vulnerable and feels safe and supported to be vulnerable. That was the important thing. And we'll chat about that, I think, later in more detail. But I also knew that one of the biggest distractions are the technology that we have in our pocket. And I actually have my phone in the kitchen. It's not even here, so I could hold it up. But I said, okay, we need to remove technology. Like that weekend retreat, I didn't have reception, so I turned off my phone for like the whole weekend. And I think that contributed to how much I was present with the new people that I met that weekend. So I said, okay, let me take a group of people completely away from technology. Let's go backcountry camping. Let's go canoeing in Algonquin Park, 4 hours north of Toronto. And there is no cell phone reception. So don't even, no need to even bring it. So we can focus on connecting with each other and with nature and with ourselves. But the one part that worried me a bit was the 4 hours it takes to even get to the park. And I was really designing this as an experience with different activities that we do. We had like a dinner before we left to plan some things. And I wanted the experience to start when we leave the city, not when we arrive at the park. And I just, in a whim, like a week before we left, I was like, hey, I have all these questions that I collected from like books and podcasts and that I always wanted to ask people, but I never had the courage to. What if I just print them on a bunch of cards? And within like 2.5 hours, I designed the first version of the deck, sent it off to the printer the same day, got that first version, and basically handed a deck of cards to each car. Said, here's some questions, just like open it up.
That's amazing.
Have some conversations, and by the time we get to the park, you're not strangers anymore. You know each other a little bit. And it turned out that the weekend was filled with these amazing conversations. Some of them, like, we paddled out at night into the middle of the lake under the stars, and it was like completely quiet. You could just hear like a little bit of the water there. And then we had these amazing conversations that were kind of inspired by the cards, not necessarily just like answering the cards anymore. We just were free flowing with, because we felt, okay, this is a group of people I can go really deep with. And fast forward, everybody wanted to take the deck and use it with their family and at workshops and with their friends. And I did a lot more play testing, realizing maybe the biggest lesson from this first version to this one that is available now is the 3 categories. So now the questions are curious, brave, and then vulnerable.
And what was your thinking behind those 3 categories?
Yeah, so the first version didn't have categories. So there's some questions I've noticed from just playing it with people that make people really uncomfortable, especially if that's the first question that comes up. And I remember one question in particular that we asked on that weekend was, have you ever cheated? And
wow.
If you just meet someone, no background, like even think of like networking event, and instead of, hey, what do you do? You ask, hey, have you ever cheated? You probably know that it's going to be an uncomfortable situation. So I noticed, okay, some questions make really good like opener questions, and then other questions make really good, like we spent the whole day building a campfire and setting up a tent and having adventures, and now we're sitting by the campfire. Now we can have those types of conversations. That question, by the way, is not in the deck anymore. I had, I think, about 75 questions that I narrowed down to the 48 that ended up being in the deck. Based on just playing it with people. I had like 2-3 times a week for a couple of months. I just brought them everywhere, invited people for tea and coffee and drinks and food, and just played it, and then realized, okay, this question I think makes a great opener question. This question is one that needs to come later. And that's how I kind of categorized the curious, brave, vulnerable in a way that we need to, with a group or with a partner, build in that time to create that trust to have those vulnerable conversations. Because if somebody and you probably know someone who's not afraid to be vulnerable and might put out maybe a little bit too much from the beginning that makes you go like, oh, that's a lot. I didn't need to know that much about your life. We just met. That's kind of the one side of the story. And the other way is somebody who is like, I don't want to talk about personal things. Takes a really long time. And we need to kind of find that place in the middle. And the way I describe it now, it's the same way as starting a campfire, going back to my camping analogy. You need to start with lighting the paper or your tinder, and then you add your little sticks and kindling, and only by the end you can put the big log still have here somewhere. Only then you can get the big log to catch fire. You can't really do like hold a lighter up to this and expect it to turn into a big fire. You have to go through the steps and build in that time. So
did you see on the business side of things, how was 2020? Because I mean, a lot of people spent time at home. I know there's a lot of like deck companies that make these decks nowadays. Did you see, I guess, what was the feedback during 2020? What was business like? Did you shift the way you wanted to grow your business?
I definitely did a big, but also a small pivot. It felt big at the time. Now it actually feels like it was very much aligned with the work that I was already doing. But I was not bought in the idea that now we have to use technology to stay connected to each other. Like I said, usually we turn off our phones and just checking. My son was running around with it the other day, if I find it. But usually at my in-person events, I would take a padded envelope like this, and we would turn it into a cell phone sleeping bag by drawing like a little face and a sleeping bag on it, or just customizing with your name or stickers. Put your phone in, seal it up. Now it's really not reachable, and we can be present with each other. Mm-hmm. Once COVID started happening and we couldn't meet in person anymore, I thought, okay, this is it. I'm not going to be able to do any of my work because it all relies on the fact that we turn off technology, and it's just not possible. So it took me a while to figure out that there's a huge opportunity here to figure out how to really be present with each other when we're using technology. And I started experimenting and just hosting a bunch of events, some of them using my cards and just putting people in breakout rooms, letting them have conversations, going through the different stages of like curious, brave, vulnerable, and then started teaching some of the things I've been noticing. And there was one event that kind of, one experiment that I did that changed everything, which was I attempted to break the Guinness Book World Record for the world's largest virtual group hug. And I actually did some research on how to like get into Guinness Book of World Records, but I also at that time already had announced that it's happening tomorrow and just invited some friends. And I think there were like 8 people that RSVP'd. So I already knew that this is like, it's not going to be a Guinness Book World Record, but I just liked calling it that. Also, I had no idea what does it mean to do a group hug. Like how do you hug someone through a screen? And I was just thinking of all the people that live by themselves that don't actually have a partner or even a pet to hug, like not getting that physical touch. And what we ended up doing is we just grabbed a couple of items that we could be hugging. So I showed like a pillow or a stuffed animal. And just for fun, I brought in this big box of toilet paper that my wife just bought from Costco the kind of couple of days before. That was when toilet paper was in high demand. And we just got one of those big deliveries. So we're like, let me hug this. And it actually felt the most like a human because the pillow was like just too soft and the stuffed animal for my son was too small. And I played some really emotionally charged music, like a movie soundtrack, which I love doing on Zoom because music really helps amplify the emotions. And then as I was like closing my eyes, I had this moment where I remembered how my son gave me a hug that week, because he was terrified of the fire alarm. And he just gave me this he was really frightened and he gave me this hug. He didn't let go and was just like shaking, and I just hugged him back because that was the only thing I could do. I couldn't stop the fire alarm from happening. And it was like half an hour before he fell asleep in my arms. And I remembered that moment when I was hugging the toilet paper. Completely forgot that I was still on a Zoom call. So when I opened my eyes, I looked at the screen and like nobody was looking at the screen. Everybody was having a moment by themselves. Like people were like tearing up. And then I realized, okay, what I thought was just a fun little experience for like 15 minutes. Let's hug something for a song and then say goodbye and go into the weekend, turned into another hour of us just debriefing the experiences that we've had. And that was, for me, the turning point where I realized, wow, you can forget that you're talking to a screen. You can feel a connection to like other people and can have these really like emotional moments with technology, not without technology.
Yeah, and dude, you're a huge fan of creating safety or psychological safety during your events. So can you explain a little bit about like what is psychological safety and what are some methods that people can adopt to make sure that their audience feels safe?
Yeah, like even thinking about that experience that I just explained, like would you feel safe to start tearing up with a group of people that you've never met? Or even more so with your work colleagues that you like see every day. I would say most people don't feel that safety, and that is probably psychological safety to the maximum. But the idea behind it is feeling safe to speak up, feeling safe to admit mistakes, feeling safe to ask questions when you don't know the answer, without the fear of being like made fun of or being punished for bringing something like that up. And Google did this study where they found that the highest performing teams, that's actually the number one indicator. If they have psychological safety, then everything else is possible for them to be high performing. And makes me like think all the time, like how can you be creative and innovative and try new things and like be uncomfortable in business as in like the personal life. Like I see psychological safety not something that happens in meetings and teams, but also at an event, at a workshop. Like if you ask people to share something that is challenging, even like the dinners that you create that psychological safety, and it starts from the first invitation, it starts from the first connection when they walk in the door. And it's the same thing online. Like it's the email that goes out beforehand. It's what is happening when they click join the Zoom meeting. What is the first thing they see, they hear, they experience? So the beginning, I would say the first 20 minutes is probably the most crucial in making sure that people feel included and that they opt in to engage rather than opting out to disengage.
Love that, man. I think how you start a virtual event or a virtual meeting completely sets the tone for the remaining session. Like my virtual dinners are typically 2 hours. Even when I host them with companies or for myself or for other people, they're always 2 hours. But there's that first 15 to 20 minutes where I'm setting a ton of context as to what's about to happen. And I show transparency, I show vulnerability. And I think like you as the leader or as the moderator or facilitator, you need to lead by example. And I think
for sure.
I totally echo what you said. That first 20 minutes for me sets the context for the entire 2 hour session. Whereas if I hadn't done that and I just kicked off a meeting or a session, I don't know if I'd have the same level of buy-in.
I would say that I create psychological safety not only for the participants, I think that's kind of number one, but also for myself. I mean, if you ever felt nervous when you're facilitating with a group, as soon as there's a certain amount of psychological safety, the pressure is lower to perform. Like one thing that I always say, because we are using technology a lot in the last year, there's so many things that can go wrong. An internet might cut out, or somebody might lose power, or microphone stop working. Like whatever it is, it's not really anybody's fault, but just acknowledging, hey, this might happen, but that's okay. We'll just go to plan B and we'll continue. Suddenly the pressure's off of like, okay, what about all the things go wrong that I can't control? Well, as long as I acknowledge that this might happen, and everybody says, yeah, no problem, we understand, it happened to everyone, right? Then it's so much easier to continue.
So man, let's transition this to virtual events, because I love virtual events. I know they're a big part of my business and my life, and I'm sure they're a big part of your life as well. And I love creating moments throughout my virtual experience that people remember. Call them magical, call them human to human, call them whatever you want. But I think there's certain moments that you can introduce into any event to make that event noteworthy, for lack of a better word, something that people don't forget, something that's different than like a typical Zoom meeting. So how do you create magical moments at virtual events?
Yeah, I call them exactly magical human moments. And they're kind of tapping into some of what happened at that virtual hug event. Like, how can we have people feel something and leave with like something that has changed for them, even if it's a small transformation, where they walk away better than the way they showed up. And to me, there's a lot of different elements to it, but when I'm thinking, it is about structuring your event and then asking people to do something that is slightly outside of the comfort zone. And one of my favorite activities actually is one that also reminds you of one of the key ingredients when we want to connect with a person. I'm actually going to put you on the spot here because we have not tested this before, but I know that you'll probably find the answer with like one or two guesses. And I always ask this, babies have totally figured out how to connect with adults because they do two things. Can you guess what they are?
They keep asking questions.
Let's go like further back, like they can't even talk yet, like couple-week-old baby or month-old baby.
They try to imitate or replicate their surroundings.
Yes, I'm thinking like even simpler. I see you're already trying to find like the complicated thing. It's really simple. I'm doing it actually right now, the two things.
Eye contact, attention?
Yes, eye contact.
Okay.
It's eye contact, and I would say smiling. Like we're smiling, both of us right now.
Right.
And I've had this experience with my son. Like he didn't open his eyes for like almost 2 weeks after he was born, and he did not really smile at me unless he was passing gas, which I don't really count, like the social smile, until he was a few months old. So I had a very hard time connecting with him until that happened, until he looked at me and he smiled because I made a fart sound. I think that was the first thing that made him smile. Again, relating to what the experiences that he's had. Like, he's like, oh, I know what that is funny. But that's the things that are really hard to do on Zoom, because I'm looking at my camera. Now you feel like I'm making eye contact with you, but I can't really see your face. Now I'm looking at your face.
Similarly, when I'm looking dead straight in the camera, I'm looking at you, but I can't see you.
Yeah, so we're always playing. It's like a seesaw. We can't be both on the top at the same time, where our eyes actually match. That's the same. It would happen in person. So I like to recreate that in an activity that I call the virtual eye gazing experiment, where I have a few volunteers look at the camera, and everybody else looks at the screen and makes eye contact with them, and then I have that person imagine that they're talking to a close friend, or they're listening to someone that is really has a lot of like a meaningful conversation. They're just having their listening face, and maybe there's something funny that happens, and you let that build up in your face and in your body language. Add that with some, again, like movie soundtracks or cheesy love songs. People are falling in love, but it's also a simulation. Like, that person that you think is looking like into your soul is actually just looking at a camera. But it's moments like these where you realize, oh wow, humans are meant to connect. Like, you learn so much about a person, even if you have to do it in like 2 turns. Like, we'll have to switch.
Dude, I love that. I love that you strategically pair it to music as well. And there's a difference between like a song or a very particular song. So I know for my dinners as well, when people come back from breakout rooms, there's a very certain song playing that's going to hit them a certain way exactly when they need it the most. And I love creating a space where people can cry and just experience tears of joy or gratitude or memories or loved ones. It's one of the best things about my virtual events, and I'm sure with your events, is just creating that safe atmosphere for people just to be themselves and have zero judgment on what's happening. And I don't even notice people, like, yes, you see people cry and you notice it, but you don't give a shit. Like, it's celebrated. It's beautiful. It's not like, oh my God, can you believe Jan cried at the event? Like, it's none of that stuff, right? It's just this group dynamic where everyone feels equally as invested and equally invested in the success of the event. It's super cool.
And I think, it's about setting the tone, like you said before. And just from the way you invite people, they know what type of experience to expect. Like, when I used to host dinners in person using my cards, like, I would purposefully say, hey, this is a dinner where we'll have conversations that are probably going to be uncomfortable. You might share things you might have not ever shared with anyone. We're definitely not going to do small talk, and you can't bring your phone. If that doesn't work for you, probably not a good idea to attend.
It's not for you.
Yeah.
So, dude, I've got a couple of questions before we wrap, but before I ask you my final 3, I know you're big on being present during a Zoom meeting. Like, right now, you already said your phone is in a different room altogether. My phone is not in a different room, but it's not in my pocket. Like, I feel like that's good. It's not in my pocket. I can't touch it. But how do you stay present, and how can other people remain present on Zoom? Because it's very easy to open up tabs, or to be looking at the time, or to be looking at the background. Like, I see a streetcar going down the road. There's traffic and highways. Like, there's a lot of stimulus. How do you help people remain focused?
Yes, and there's I think a difference between being focused and like staring at a screen or a camera for the whole time versus just being present. Like, if we again look at if you met somebody at a coffee shop, they're probably not going to be glued at looking at your face like the whole time you meet. You're looking at your coffee, you're looking around, but they're still like, you still feel that they're present with you. And it's the same thing online. So I don't believe that we have to be like looking at the camera or the screen the whole time. But talking about distractions, something I'm so guilty of this. Whenever there's like a dull moment, like somebody's having this run-on sentence, I'm like, oh, let me just check if I got a new email. And like, I would swipe on my computer And depending on how the light is in my room, like in the evening, they might see suddenly my light is super bright.
Dude, that happens in every Zoom meeting. You always know when someone's opening up a tab.
Like when somebody's wearing glasses, I mean, you're going to notice. Yeah. Other people are going to see it. So what I do to kind of not get distracted is I make Zoom full screen, make the other person take up the whole screen, even like including the clock, so I don't see anything. And I hide self-view. So on Zoom, you can actually hide your own video, so you only see the other person, which is great for like small groups or one-on-one calls, because you're not looking at yourself and worrying about like, does my hat still sit right? Is my hair good? Like, I should have probably cleaned up. Like, you're not worrying about all these other things, which you, again, wouldn't do in person. Like, you're not going to be holding a mirror next to the person that you're talking to and constantly checking, like, am I still looking good? Am I like framed in the center of the screen? And then the last thing that I do is, just because of the eye contact, I try to move the other person as close as I can to my camera. So there's not a lot of distance between them. If like, because it's full screen and my camera is like right above my laptop, as close as I can, like it's literally scraping the laptop when I close it. I need to like lift up my camera so I can get it from underneath. Then it feels a little bit more like we're making eye contact, even if I'm just slightly looking down.
That's fascinating, because I just made my screen full screen based on your recommendation, and immediately I feel more like in this moment. But now, because it's full screen and you're side by side, I feel like I'm looking at the left side of my laptop, and I don't know how you're seeing it, but for me, I'm looking straight into your eyes, but I'm not sure how you're seeing it because you're on the left-hand side of my screen.
So now if you hide self-view, like if you hover over your thumbnail...
But does that disrupt the recording though? Because like just the recording of the podcast, will it just focus on you?
That is a good question. I can't confirm 100%. Also depends on how you're recording it.
Right. So it's typically gallery view, typically with both of us neck and neck. But the moment I go speaker view, I know that for a podcast like this, the recording only picks up the speaker, so it won't look at you nodding your head.
Well, you could do a quick test and hide yourself and then show yourself again, and then you'll know once you click at the recording. Yeah. It definitely is one of those things. I don't like, if you're just having a one-on-one conversation, I don't like looking at myself anymore. If I'm like facilitating and there's like 30 people, yes, I want to see myself to make sure that my camera is still working and whatever I want to show people is actually being broadcast, because you don't want to be talking and your video is frozen maybe for a long time.
Cool. I will test that out. So dude, I've got three final questions. Question 1. What are you most excited about in the next 60 days?
In the next 60 days. What date is it? Can I say March. 90 days?
Sure. Let's go with 90.
All right. What I'm most excited about in the next 90 days, for my birthday in April, my wife and me and our son, we booked a cabin in the middle of nowhere without internet service or cell service for a weekend. And with the world that we live in right now, especially in Toronto right now, where we can't really leave the house, I'm really, really hoping that we're able to go and just get away from the city for a little bit, because although I love living in the city, I miss nature, and these days it's really hard to get out. So that's definitely one really big thing that I'm looking forward to. Also, it'll be right at the end of having accomplished a couple of business goals that I'm like taking a time to celebrate that.
Good for you, man. Totally echo the whole nature thing. Anytime I have an opportunity to leave the city and just not bring my phone is like some of my best and most creative moments, actually. It's not behind a screen. It's definitely out in nature. Next question. Are there any books that you recommend people read, whether they're entrepreneurial books or just on how to become a better person, how to build better relationships? Are there books that you often refer back to in your life?
Yes. I'm just going to say the first 2 that come up, because probably I could come up with more, but I think two is even more than enough.
Yeah.
The first one is called Belong by Radha Agrawal. I don't know if you've read that.
I haven't.
She's the founder of the Daybreaker movement, like the early morning dance parties, which, by the way, has done really well moving their dance parties to the virtual space. I think they have one at least once a week. And now the community is kind of growing globally. Her book is actually following a similar methodology than a course that I created called Find Your People, where it's like to find your people, your tribe. First step is you need to go inside. You need to learn who you are and what you value. So the first part of the book, and it's really beautifully illustrated, is a couple of activities that help you understand yourself better. And then the second part of the book is all about, okay, now that we went inside, let's go outside and find other people that you resonate with. And I just love that kind of duality of her approach. Cool. So that is definitely the number one book I would recommend when it comes to like relationship building.
What's the second one?
The second one is more of a personal development book. It's The Desire Map, Danielle Laporte. And funny story. So I met Danielle Laporte once at a conference she came down for like a lunch, and I said something to her that probably I shouldn't have said. I told her, your book changed my life, and I didn't even read it yet. And then she was really upset that I didn't read the book, but I did read it afterwards. But right. I just wanted to tell her that it already changed my life from just understanding the basic principle, which is that instead of setting goals that are for things or objects, like I want to get the red Ferrari or I want to own a house, what we're really after is a desired feeling of how do we feel once we accomplish that goal. And we should structure our life around feeling that feeling every day, and our lives will be so much better and we'll achieve our goals, rather than just going to we're happy once we achieve that goal. Mm-hmm. What if happiness is actually the thing that you have every day? So that principle, and again, it's a great book that has like a whole workbook section with a lot of prompts to fill out.
Sweet. I'll have to check that one out as well. I love what you just said about the feeling of it. Is it really what we're chasing? And my last question. So tomorrow morning, everyone wakes up, every city, every country, every continent, from India to Europe to Canada to Toronto. Everyone wakes up tomorrow morning, they open up their bedroom blinds, and they're looking at a billboard. Except tomorrow morning, Jan controls what gets written on that billboard for the entire world to see. What message would you share with the world?
Ooh. And I guess it has to be big letters so they can read it from far away, so I don't have a lot of space.
That's totally up to you. Tomorrow you're in control.
I think something around having the courage to be curious and to have vulnerable conversations with especially the people that you might think you have nothing in common with. And in a political climate that we live in right now, I find that those conversations are going to be so needed, and they're going to be so hard and so challenging. Like, I know myself, this is something I'm working on still myself, is I love going deep with people that align with the same values. But I mean, having a conversation where you're really curious and not judging with someone that you don't share the same values with, I think that requires a lot of courage.
Well said, dude. Man, where's the best place for people to follow up with you and get in touch?
Easier than spelling my name is if you go to askdeepquestions.com. That will also link to the cards and then my website and all of the other magical things that are happening.
Dude, incredible. Thank you so much for your time today. Love talking to another fellow community builder, and wish you nothing but success this year and for many years to come, man. Thank you.
Same here. Thanks for allowing me to share a little bit about my story. And there will be more Karan and Jan time happening very soon.
Awesome, man.